Welcome to another edition of the Real Energy Podcast. Folks, we are here again for a Real Feels episode. I think this is 3. Is this 3?
I don't know. I can't remember.
I think this is like 2. I think this
3.
is like
It's got to be 3.
Yeah. Because I don't remember who we
Peanut
had.
and Ramon, and then, oh my God, why can't I think of
your friend that had the guy that killed her daughter or something?
Yeah. So I'm here.
Oh, and then we had the friend with the breast cancer.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. So this is 4.
So this is 4.
Yeah, this is Real 4. Yeah, we've got to do an update on the cancer thing.
What about Megan? That was a Real Feels, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's 5.
This is Real Feels 5?
So let's just make it a 10, even round it up.
Fuck it. Your boy Pat here, across from me, Patricia. Haran's here, Tanya's here, and our guest of the day, Justin Danforth, right?
Yes.
He is here. Tell us his story. He's got a very interesting story. Justin, speak to the people.
Again, first of all, thanks for having me. So a little bit about my story. We all have, the times where we have to weather a storm. And in 2002, summer of 2002, a very heavy storm came over my head. I just turned 21, and I was facing I got incarcerated. I got locked up facing a first-degree murder charge without the possibility of a life sentence, without the possibility of parole. So that being said, I only had an 8th grade education, and at the time my daughter was 10 months old. So I did 2 years in county jail before ever being sentenced. While waiting to be sentenced, my lawyer, who would make various visits, updating me on the case, and we had a strong case. The evidence was very minute, if not absent. The state really didn't have much on me in regards to a conviction. So it looked very good, it looked like I would win. And then 3 months prior to actually going to trial, our trial date was set. He comes in and he says, if you go to trial, you will lose. You will get a life sentence. The law is without parole. You will never get outside. You will never see your daughter outside of the fence or gates again. And so my confusion was, what happened to the fight? When your lawyer throws in a towel, and that's who's defending you, you don't have a leg to stand on. A lot of things happen, mentally, emotionally. And for me, the biggest thing was, what am I going to do now? Because I was faced with a decision of go to trial or take a plea. And he kept pushing me to take a plea. And the first plea he came with was 19 to 24 years. And when he told me, the DA's offering you a deal, I'm like, that's not a deal. I'm not doing 25 years for something I didn't do. And of course, back then my language was a little bit more vulgar, and I called him stupid and a few other things and told him to get out of my face. And I told the officer to take me back to my cell. So he comes back a couple weeks later and he says, look, the DA came down on the time. If you take the plea, it'll be 15 to 19. And I looked at him, I said, I'm not doing 20 years. And they were wearing me down. County jail is, it's a gladiator school. It's a headache, right, to say the least. But, so I said, I'll tell you what, you get me a cap put on 10 and I'll do a dime. I'll do 10 years. So he said, I don't know. Let me see what I can do. So a few weeks go by. He comes back. He says, man, I got you the plea you wanted. Let's just sign the plea. I got it. He breaks out the calculator and he's doing some math, and he's like, based on, your points and the sentencing structure and the sentencing guidelines and all of these things, that is how they come up with how they sentence you in regards to your time that you serve and based on your crime. He said, he starts putting in the percentages, 85% of this time, and good time, good behavior, you'll get out. And the calculator read 10.6. He said, man, it's only 6 months longer than you said you would do. So I thought about it. I said, okay, I'll sign it. So I signed a plea. And once you have your time, you immediately get sent on state. So I got on state, and when you go on state, you go through processing, and I went to my case analyst, my case manager, the analyst, and I'm in her office, and she's going over everything, and she goes, all right, you got a minimum of 14 years and 4 months and a maximum of 16 years and 9 months. I said, yeah, I'm not worried about all of that. I'll be out in 10 and a half. And plus, I already had
2 years,
2
time
years
served.
time served.
So it should have been 8.5, and technically, right, with the time
But the
served?
total.
But they
Total.
calculate. They
Count it.
calculate when the percentages. They calculate 85% of your time. If you do 14 minimum, 85% of that will be.
Was it
down.
federal or state?
State.
And this is in North Carolina, you said?
Yes, in the
Okay.
state of North Carolina. So she looked at me and she said, no, you got to do a minimum of 14 years and 4 months before you're released. I said, yeah, but I mean, I'm not planning on getting in no trouble. I'm going to get my good time. I'm going to do 85% of that. I'll be out in 10 and a half years. And she looked at me and she was like, no, baby, I'm sorry. You got to do 14 years and 4 months.
They
That
didn't-
is your 85% of your time.
They didn't explain this to you at trial.
No.
So this is after you got convicted.
Yeah.
They tell you all this. Oh wow.
So you can
And-
imagine, man, my face, my heart, everything just dropped. I was like,
So let me ask you a question real quick. So since you plead, you can't do a retrial. You can't go appeal it or any of
No.
that. So
No.
you're done. So
You're
that's
done.
it. You're okay.
so the first thought was he played me.
Yeah.
My lawyer, he played me. But as I sit here today with you guys, man, it's the greatest thing. Like, I'm so happy he did, because I was dumb and ignorant, and at the time, young. On top of that, so one of the worst things that going to prison at that time for me was my mindset, because I was real good at doing bad. I was the best of the best. Like, I had built a reputation off of how evil and bad I could actually be. And it took me a good 3.5 to 4 years before I realized I was even in prison for the next decade plus, because my mind was so far gone in terms of, this is all I know. See, back then, that's what we used to claim. We use it as a crutch or an out, the street life, this is all I know.
So what was your background before this incident happened? As far as, because we've talked about it many a times. People are product of their circumstances and how they grew up, but a lot of times it starts at the house.
Exactly. So prior to getting locked up, I used to look up to. So I was a people pleaser growing up. Like, I looked up to my old man, who was my stepfather, but he's all I knew as a father. I don't know my real dad. And my stepfather, to me, is my dad, and he's like 6'2". He was always about 300 pounds, but solid, not fat or overweight, in shape. He always had a construction company. He was a man's man. He drank alcohol, started fights and won fights, and ended fights, things like that. So from where I come from, that's what men did. Like, it's different today, but that's another topic. So I looked up to my dad, because even right now I'm only 5'1", and back then I was that much shorter and really scrawny. Like, I got a little bit of size on me now. I'm not gonna get taller, but I get wider. I get bigger, right? Yeah. So I looked up to my dad. He was like, I always tried to impress my dad, but he was the type that nothing was ever good enough for him. He wasn't easily impressed. And I could make straight A's, and he'd say, "Why don't you got an A+?" So I became a people pleaser, and I always tried to do or say things that I thought other people would, like, right? And so in doing so, it was, people thought like the class clown, or the one who will break the rules. So I started off looking up to my older cousins, who they broke the rules, and they were good at it. From boosting cars to hustling drugs to you name it. And we grew up extremely poor. Like, I remember a time very vividly. a lot of stuff has been blocked out from my childhood, but one of my most vivid memories is one time where we had no electricity and no water, but we had a wood stove, a kerosene heater. We would heat water on that to pour it in the bathtub to take warm baths. The water came from gallon jugs that my dad would stop by his mom, my grandmother's house, and fill up a trunk. Back then they were hoopties. So the trunk was huge. I can't tell you how many gallon jugs of water it was, but it was enough water to put in the bath so we could take baths and flush the toilet with. You had to pour a bucket of water in the toilet for it to flush. And my aunt had worked at a gas station, the graveyard shift. He would go there and get ice out of the ice maker. She would let him go in the back. It was a truck stop and get free ice. We put that in a cooler to keep sandwich meats, and that's what we ate off of because we didn't have a refrigerator with no electricity. All of that being said, money was always the argument. My mom and dad, I cannot remember a day going by my entire childhood that they didn't argue at least one time a day about money, about finances. They stayed at each other's neck, and it was always finances. So I said all of that to say, for me, growing up, it was chasing money. Well, like I said, I looked up to my older cousins because that's what they did. They got money. They got a lot of money.
Let me ask you a question. So you said something very interesting. You said a lot of the things that happened to you in your childhood was blocked out. Was that a conscious decision?
I believe so.
Why do you think so?
Just because I choose not to. I'm not one of those people who is like, woe me, or, oh, my past is why I do what I do. Like, I make very conscious decisions on everything I do. Whether they're right or wrong, I take full responsibility and fault for it. So I always overlook a lot of the things in my childhood so that I don't ever try to use it as a crutch or blame it.
But, one of the things about it, though, is, and we've talked about it many a times, about when people don't come to terms with their childhood, good or bad, your actions going forward tend to have a direct reflection of that area that you block out. Unknowingly, that you don't actually know why you're doing these things. And we've talked about it many a times, right? You don't know why. I don't know why I'm very reactive, right? If somebody says, I'm just that way. Well, really, you're really not that way. You're that way because of things you've seen, right? You grew up, I'm not saying you, but somebody has grown up in a chaotic household where, mom and dad fought all the time, right? And dad, whenever he comes in, starts going off on mom, right? And that's what you grew up and see. You don't know that you're being programmed that way, right? But that's actually your programming. But a lot of times people don't actually know why they are that way because of, their childhood. So
they haven't processed the childhood.
They haven't processed their childhood. So what my question is to you is that, and we're going to talk about your redemption story because I like I said, we were talking about this in pre-production. I'm very interested in your redemption story, but more so, I'm curious why you're in your redemption story. Have you thought about revisiting some of those memories, right? To say why the fuck I was that way, and some of the reactionary things that I did, some of the people-pleasing things that I did, like that section of your brain that you blocked out. Have you really thought about revisiting that?
No, because first and foremost, like there are certain things that I didn't block out that, like I said, that I still can remember very vividly, but I don't need to revisit it for anything because I am where I am today and I haven't revisited. You see what I'm saying? So for me, it's not necessary. I don't do a lot of things based off of societal norms, what the psychologist says, and let's lay on the couch and talk about your mom and dad arguing all day. I don't need any of that in order to better myself or do the right things or make the right choices. Right? Maybe some people do. If it works for them, it works for them. That's great. But for me personally, to answer your question, no, I don't think about revisiting it because I haven't revisited at this point and I love where I'm at in life,
Yeah.
and
Sometimes,
it's still
sometimes
growing.
you don't need to revisit it, right? You know what I mean? Sometimes, like,
It is what it is, right?
Yeah, it is
If
what
it
it is.
ain't broke, don't fix
Why
it.
would you want to worry about the past? The past is the past. Let that go. Work on the future.
Yeah,
You know,
Yeah, that's how I look at things.
I agree with you. But the other part of that scenario is some people don't understand why they make the decisions, even as adults,
Yeah.
why they make the decisions that they do. You
They're
feel me?
probably but they're probably not advancing their lives. You know what I mean? On a regular
Yeah,
basis.
that's because look, I'll be honest with
They
you,
need
and
to they need to
we've talked about this,
Yeah.
right? Because when your wife, shout out to Nona, when she talked about you being on the podcast, you know, Haran and I, we were just spitballing ideas and just questions, right? Because we didn't know you, and I was stalking your Facebook just to get some information on you, and I told Haran, I said I'm very interested in the redemption story, but a lot of times people don't understand why they make the decisions that they do.
right. And it's relative to every individual. And like I said, if that works for them to revisit, then they should do that. Like, I'm not saying it's right or it's wrong. I'm just saying I didn't need to.
Yeah. I feel you.
And you're right. A lot of people don't understand why they do what they do. For me, I understood very well.
So
what I
you were
was
chasing
doing.
the money because of all that. Okay, because that you needed that stability, or you thought it would provide stability, or take away that. So that's where we were. I want to get back to. I'm curious where the rest of the story goes.
So, and that's just it. It led to a life of chasing paper, as we call it, and doing what we call the street life.
So when you were in prison, right? So you got sent to prison. You're probably very angry for a few years, right? Trying to figure out what the hell happened here. I'm doing
Got
14
bamboozled,
right? What happened where you said, "All right, it's done. What's done is done. When I get out, what am I gonna do?"
Yeah. So seriously, good question. Because when you're in jail, how long did that take? How long did that take how long did the anger take to get over?
So, I did the 2 years in county, and then once I got on state, it took probably another good 3 years to realize this ain't where I want to be for the next, for the rest of my life, or the next. At the time, once she told me my sentence, now it wasn't 14 years and 4 months that I'm faced with. It's actually 16 years and 9 months. You have to earn the 85%. That 85% of your time is good time. It's not two separate things, so it doesn't keep getting. So I had to do a maximum. I would do a maximum, unless I caught more charges, of 16 years and 9 months. So that's my sentence. So a good 3 or 4 years before I realized this ain't right. This ain't where I want to be. This ain't for me.
Because like the first 2 years in state, in like jail, you're just waiting, right? You're just waiting to get the sent.
Meade
And then,
County?
Yeah, in county,
In
you're
county.
just waiting, right? And then when you go to prison, you're like, okay, then you're getting you're acclimated to your daily routines, right? And then once you get your daily routines, you get to start thinking. So the books come into play. Was other people in there influencing you on what to do? We don't even know what you do now. You know what I mean? Like, how did
we
you?
are all over.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're
we're
gonna
kinda
we're
all
gonna
over,
get to that.
yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna get to that.
Yeah.
So yeah, of course. For me,
So you're in there. It's 3 years. You're angry about it. You hate your life. Then what happens?
so going to prison, as I tell anybody and everybody, was the best thing that ever happened for me. Because life happens for us and not to us, right? I don't play the victim mentality, and that's the difference in knowing life happens for you rather than to you. So going to prison was the best thing that ever happened for me because it gave me time to sit with myself. That's something I notice a lot of people out here don't do. They don't really sit with themselves.
Alone time.
Yeah. So, and in sitting with myself, I had no other choice but to face myself. And the person I was looking at was just disgusting to me. I became really, really dissatisfied with where I was, who I was, how I was, and all of the above. And so that's when it became a necessity to start making a difference. And then you just start with changing. Like, deduction is the biggest thing you can do in your life, is start taking away the things that you covet or hold on so dearly to that aren't necessary or needed. Whether it's cigarettes, alcohol, drugs, porn, gambling, all of the things, right? I don't care if you got a habit of binge watching Netflix. If it's not necessarily needed for the growth, for your personal development, for you to get to the next level, whatever that level is, we all have a vision where we want to be or who we want to become. And if that's not conducive to that vision, then deduct it, subtract it, get rid of it.
Was it
So-
a light switch or was it a process?
It was a process. Yeah, it doesn't happen overnight. It wasn't just like I woke up one day and was like, hey, I'm going to change the trajectory of the rest of my life. Nah. If only it was that easy, then everybody would be who they want to be, right? So it was a process. In prison, you're looked at. A lot of your respect will come from how you carry yourself. You don't have to be this big bad dude. I don't know what they show on TV or movies or whatever you guys watched out here at the time, but like whatever the image is of inmates in prison, right? It's how you carry yourself. If you respect yourself, you carry yourself respectfully. And in prison, there's things that you do every single day as your program, like getting up early, reading, studying, praying, whatever it is, right? But